Hey, if you're thinking about taking the FAA Part 107 drone pilot exam and becoming a drone pilot, a licensed drone pilot, today I'm going to talk about the things you need to know to set up that exam and to pass that exam. And if you're already a drone pilot but you need to take your recurrent test, you might want to stick around as well. The process has changed. Cue the intro. Hey, Ron here. In a few moments, I'm going to be heading over to Oakland County Airport to take my FAA Part 107 recurrent pilot test. And this is the third time I've taken it. So before I head over there, I wanted to talk to you about what you need to know to schedule your exam and what you're going to need to know to pass your exam. But before we can talk about what's on the exam, first things first, you need to know how to schedule and set up to take your test. You have to do that online. Now, before you can schedule a time or a place to take this test, you need to either get an FTN number or find out what your FTM number is. It's your flight traffic number, and you can get that at IACRA. So if you're already a pilot and you're doing a recurrent test, you already have one. So you can sign in to the IACRA site, and it will be listed right here where this home is. So once you sign in, and after you accept it, your information will come up and it'll be right here. That's where you'll find your FTN number. So if you don't have one, you need to make an account with the IACRA, the IACRA, I guess. Now, once you have your FTN number, you can go ahead and you can go over to a company. The website it's actually PSI. This is where you're going to go, and this is the website you're going to go to. And once you have your FTN number, you can go to PSI True Talent, and you can get some information here. But once you have your number, what you're going to do is you're going to go view test authorization requirements, and it'll tell you what you need and all that good, happy information. But then you can create an account, and when you do that, I have already done that, you fill out all this information, you continue, and then it will set you up on where you can take the test and when you can take the test. So your test has to be scheduled through PSI True Talent. And you can't go there to schedule your Part 107 exam until you have an FTN number. So you get your FTN number, you go to PSI True Talent, create an account, you walk yourself through that process, and it will give you times and dates and places where you can take your Part 107 test. Now that you know how to schedule your exam, let's talk about what's going to be on the exam. The first year I took this exam, there wasn't a lot of information about what was going to be on the test. I really spent a lot of time trying to find out what was on the test before I could even study and retain it. 2 years ago, when I did the recurrent one, the recurrent test, I got all my information off FAA.gov. They provided some great study materials, so it was much better than the first year. And again, I had no problem passing. This time, at the urging of my friend Steve, he turned me on to this book. It's the Remote Pilot 2020 Test Prep. It's a study and prepare booklet, and there's many reasons why I'm glad I made this purchase. First, it was only $20. You can get it on Amazon. But with this book, it also comes free this book, and this is the Airman Knowledge Testing Supplement, which will be used when you take your exam. So when you go in there to take your test, this is one of the very few items that you can have in there with you. And inside, it has all the charts that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but just your legends. It has legends in here for things that you're going to need to know. But more importantly, that comes free with this book. But in addition to having some questions that are going to be on the exam in this book with explanations on why each answer is correct, because again, the exam will be multiple choice. You'll have 3 choices to pick one. Another reason I like this book is because right on the inside is it takes you to prepware.com, and it gives you a code that allows you to take up to 5 practice exams, and you're going to need all 5 of those if you really want to be prepared to take your Part 107 test. Now, first things first, if you're taking this test for the first time, you're going to be tested on 5 different categories: regulations, airspace, and requirements. And I want to stop there for a second because that's where you're going to learn. You're going to need to learn about charts. You're going to need to learn about how to read what everything means on these charts. So regulations, airspace, and requirements. You'll also be tested on weather as it pertains to manned and unmanned aircraft. Loading and performance and operations. Your test will be 60 questions if this is the first time you're taking the Part 107 test. 60 questions, and you'll have 2 hours to take the exam. If you're doing a recurrent test, you'll only be faced with 40 questions, and you won't have to. You won't be tested on weather or loading performance. So your 40 questions will consist of regulations, airspace and requirements, and operations. Just know that if you're taking it for the first time, 60 questions. If you're taking it for the second time and you're doing a recurrent, 40 questions, and you'll have 90 minutes to do that. In addition to knowing the regulations, for example, you can't fly over 400 feet. You can only go 100 miles an hour, 87 knots. There's lots of regulations, but I highly recommend you become very familiar with charts and how to read legends, because those are the questions that might really cross you up. If you do take advantage of practice tests, whether it be for the remote pilot test prep or some other service, I highly recommend that you print those off and use them as study guides and pay close attention to the ones that you got wrong. Obviously, the ones you got right you feel comfortable with, but the ones you got wrong, you want to take a look at those so that you can rectify them, so that when you do take the test, you'll be fully prepared. So I could talk about how easy or difficult this test may be, but let's take a look at some of the questions that you might face when you take your Part 107 exam. What I love about this Prepware Ground School practice test and the 5 that you can take with the purchase of this test prep book is the fact that it gives you questions that are actually going to be on the Part 107 test. All these questions are among the pools of questions that will be administered during any Part 107 test. According to 14 CFR Part 107, the remote pilot in charge of a small unmanned aircraft planning to operate within Class C airspace must A. required to receive ATC authorization, B. is required to file a flight plan, or C. must use a visual observer. So just know that this Class C airspace would be something that you would see at Oakland County Airport over in Waterford. So if you're going to fly in that airspace, you are going to be required to receive authorization from air traffic control. So the answer here is A. A professional wildlife photographer operates a drone from a moving truck to capture aerial images of birds in a remote wetlands. The driver of the truck does not serve any crew member role in the operation. Is this operation in compliance with Part 107? It is compliant. So if you're in a moving truck, the driver can either be the operator of the drone or the visual observer, and definitely not the remote control in charge. So the pilot in charge. So this would be compliant with Part 107 because the driver of the truck does not serve any role in the operation. So that's good to go. What anecdotal phrase can help reverse the hazardous attitude of anti-authority? Is it A, rules do not apply in this situation, B, I know what I'm doing, or C, follow the rules? So the antidote for a hazardous attitude of anti-authority would be, hey, follow the rules. So here the answer is C. One last thing before I go. When you do take your exam, understand that you might need to read the question a couple of times and read the answers, the choices a couple of times, because they do try to jam you up sometimes with how a question is worded or even an answer is worded. Sometimes two, if not all 3 of the answers might seem correct. But my recommendation is keep reading the question until you fully grasp what they're looking for and give the best possible correct answer. With that said, it's time to head over to the Oakland County Airport. See you when I'm finished. So I just finished taking my test. I did in fact pass, thankfully. All clear. But I will tell you this, I did see some questions I didn't expect on the exam. I did see some weather questions. We weren't supposed to be asked about that, but thankfully I remembered. Again, this test costs $160, and if you fail, you have to pay that again. So you only want to take it once, so make sure you're prepared. So the good news is I have passed. But it was a little bit more difficult than I anticipated. Even though I thought I was prepared, it was difficult at times. And that's why, before I wrap this video up, here's another few examples of some questions that you might see on your Part 107 test. Here's an example of a question where they're going to try to trick you. So the question is, when turning into a taxiway from another taxiway, what is the purpose of the taxiway directional sign? A, it indicates direction to takeoff runway. B, indicates designation and direction of exit taxiway from runway. Or C, it indicates designation and direction of taxiway leading out of an intersection. So let's look at the question again. When turning into a taxiway from another taxiway, what is the purpose of the taxiway directional sign? Indicates direction to take off runway. Not necessarily, because you might not be taking off. B, it indicates designation and direction of exit taxiway from runway. In here, again, it doesn't say anything about a runway. Or C, indicates designation and direction of taxiway leading out of an intersection. I think C is correct. That's why you got to read these questions, because normally there'll be two that could be right. Sometimes three might look correct. That's why it's important to read the question, read it a couple times, and then look at the answers. Because even though two of them might look like they're both correct, there's one more correct than the other. So some of these questions you really have to take a look at and read a couple of times to make sure you're grasping what they're asking for. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like icon, share it with all your friends. Also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that bell notification button so you're notified when I make future videos. And of course, go to my website, ronrobinsonstudios.com, to find out what I can do for you. Until next time,